Good morning, everybody. It's Trumpet Vini from Nashville, Tennessee. Hi. How's everybody doing? Good. Awesome. Man, we're so excited here at Positive Trumpeters Worldwide to have our friend and extraordinary trumpet player, teacher, proponent of jazz, and jazz and sarcasm. Those two things run congruently.
Positive sarcasm
Positive sarcasm.
or
Uh,
therapeutic.
I actually had a lesson with Dr. Belck not too long ago, and when I first left, I was so overwhelmed because it was the first lesson I'd had in a number of years. As I've been able to digest what he showed me in just an hour, it's really helped me tremendously. I mean, tremendously. So, without any further ado or pomp and circumstance, Dr. Belck, take it away.
I'll supply my own pomp. So, under these circumstances, I'll supply my own pomp, and so it's great to be here. I'm really it's kind of it's nice to connect with you guys, and I've met all of you. I've got actually a fun picture of me and Josh at in Miami when he got a copy of the book, and we were kind of messing around with it. I'll have to dig that up and post it. But I took pictures of that was when I met you, I think, Josh. And so we all have an interesting connection. I checked in with Troy. Um, I had posted something last year, and I think it was well before this group got together. And I can't remember. We kind of interacted, I think, via Messenger. And he said, "Hey, if you ever want to, hang out and talk a little bit about um, Instagram." And at that point, I was completely, a babe in the woods with Instagram. I didn't even know I had an account. I didn't know anything about it. And so he's one of the first people that kind of hit me to that. And so it's really actually been very cool. So I've had a little different interaction. Of course, Armida, I saw her in the hallway for a couple of years, I guess, up at school, and she's moved on to some really, really cool things. So um, I think a lot about practicing. I think a lot about playing, and I think about the experience in general. What I'm going to talk about today, I think, and what I'd like to kind of maybe let everybody think about is how to go into practicing and how to think about practicing in a way that you can, um, especially in these times, you can look forward to the process, enjoy it, and find a way to interact with the instrument and the music in a way that's a little bit less stressful, a little more fulfilling, a little bit from sort of a meditative standpoint, a way to approach what we're doing and be able to look forward to it in a different kind of way. I ended up doing as a professional. We talked to Vini. When you become a professional, it's so difficult when you're a student and when you're becoming a professional to become consistent. That's like one of the hardest things I think for a lot of people to do. And by the time we figure out some stuff to practice and a way to practice that helps us be consistent, we tend to really latch on to those principles and that sort of way of playing and that way of doing things. And I realized after about the time I wrote this, started really writing the second book in earnest, I really started to notice that I'd really been playing about the same way for about 20 years. And though I had gotten a lot better, I hadn't really had any of those kind of jumps I was a series of plateaus, and I hadn't really I wasn't where I thought I would be or I'd hoped I'd be maybe after 20 years of doing it that way. So I started thinking a lot about revisiting all the things that I've been told and that I believe, and I realized that maybe for me to really do what I wanted to do, I had to really start to question some of the procedures and the thought processes that were underlying my philosophy about how I played. So when you have a lesson or when you practice, you're generally working out a different method. You're working on a method, and a method is a way of organizing and approaching maybe a specific skill set or a style. but they tend to be, and you might have a method that's a Caruso, you might have a Schlossberg method, which is a compilation of his teachings, which wasn't actually written as a book by him. You have routines such as the atom routine. You have a lot of different ways that you can interface with material. You have a Louis Davidson book from the old days. You have all kinds of resources, and I think what ends up happening with most of us is that we get bogged down in the methods that we're using. People are proponents of Reinhardt or proponents of Claude Gore or whatever, and those are generally methods. Now they might they have obviously great benefits. They're wonderful players. That all of those methods, approaches, um, they're proponents of this. But I want to think about, and I started thinking about this quite a bit recently. Um, you have methods and then you have principles, and the principles are the overarching aspects of playing. They are all the methods are to support your basic principles. The principles are the organizing and artistic uh, themes of what you're actually trying to do. And so, for you to understand what your principles are, you have to, once you really spent time thinking musically and artistically about principles, now we're looking at what methods can I use and how can I adapt whatever methods I use to support my artistic principles or my musical principles. I think of what we do on a continuum. We talked about this a little bit, Vinny, is that we tend to talk about efficiency as trumpet players, and I think it's um, at the one time, and we don't want to waste time. Obviously, we can't waste time when we're playing. But at the same time, efficiency is almost antithetical to artistic growth. So, in other words, being on a schedule, being efficient like a machine or a factory. Now, in what you do, when you go into the studio, Vinny, and you have to sit down, efficiency is not an option. It's one of the most important things that you have to be able to deal with, because the consistency and efficiency, you cannot waste time. I'm looking at what I do because I'm in a different space. I'm in a different artistic space than I used to be in terms of that type of playing, where I don't enjoy going into these as much as I used to, going into a session and having to go bam and do whatever it takes to get out that music. What I'd like to be able to do, and I just find that from my standpoint, that type of preparation and playing is so regimented and so it tends to be I tend to be inflexible about the way I prepare. So if I look at this point in my life in my 50s and I start thinking, okay, well, what could I do that I want to play something that's beautiful. I'd like to play something that I can connect with from a musical standpoint. I'd like to be able to challenge myself to execute difficult passages, of course, but I want the process that I go through to be more organic, to be more laid back, and to be less efficient in a way. Now, that doesn't mean I'm super conscious of time when I'm practicing, and you'll see when I go through some of this stuff, um, I'm, you know, I am efficient, but at the same time, I want to let my mind and my sort of spirit have some breathing room when I practice at this point. So, especially in these times where we have a little much more open space in terms of how we can go about things, I want to make sure that what I'm doing is supporting that way of playing. So that's one of my principles. When we look at playing in general, I've divided my playing or playing that I've observed from other people into three basic categories and practicing. One of them is what I call repair. We talk quite a bit about that, Vinny, repair. You're playing high intensity music. You're playing music that requires a great degree of physicality. And the repair, when we talk, you talk to someone like Wayne Bergeron or some of the other studio players that, or principal players in major orchestras that are doing heavy literature on a particular cycle, where they're going in and they're playing high intensity music, and therefore the next day, depending on, well, it was Josh Norton who was here. Josh was playing, he's playing lead on Les Mis, the touring, and has been there for I think 900 shows. All right, and one of the things, and Josh is a straight, as he would say, classical player, but he's basically playing a 2.5 hour or 2 hour and 45 minute show. He said basically at the sound intensity of Mahler, because he's the only trumpet, or maybe there's two trumpets. So he realized that during the weekends where they had two shows, um, he couldn't practice on those days. He could do his warm up, his routine, but he couldn't even touch the horn the next day after a show. One of this now again, this is Les Mis. Um, he said the next day, mostly, I would get up super early and warm up. He said I realized after a while I could not continue my regimen that way. I couldn't touch my horn until later in the day, and so then he had to adjust his repair cycle and his practicing cycle to allow for the high intensity kind of playing that he's doing. Now, I'll qualify all this. I don't do a huge amount of high intensity playing anymore, and I've sat next to or sat in sections that would qualify that as. And I played with Steve Patrick, our wonderful friend from down in Nashville, and we've talked about it over the years. That he plays with a great deal, and a lot of you guys down there are playing when you're in sessions, especially. You're playing a great deal of intensity. Thomas Gonch talking about going out and sitting in with Jerry Hayes' group, and about how crazy loud they were playing to, I think it was Wayne and I can't remember the other group, other trumpet players. So you've got this one end of the spectrum that's extremely physical and demanding, and then so when you sit down to practice in the morning, or when you sit down to play, Kerry Deadman, a great lead player up in Chicago, played the shows for many, many years, and still does. He said that we went up and heard him a couple of years ago, and he was playing. They were doing previews for Tootsie that was about to open on Broadway. It was getting ready to move on Broadway, so he was just finishing up his run. And he said that when he would sit down in the morning to play after doing the show the night before, he would count how many times it took him to play a note, for it to speak, for it to come out. And you just sit down and go. And he said on that day when we were having coffee with him before the show, he said it took 7 tries before, and he said, okay, it's a 7-try day. I'm starting from there, and I'm gonna begin my process. And he knew as a professional how to get to the next place where he can function as a professional. That's my idea of a bad time. I've been in that. And sitting down and going. I was on a cruise ship when they had cruise ships, and it was my first really heavy lead gig. This was almost over 25 years ago, and it was more than I was prepared to do. And so I played these production shows and dance shows. So you play 2 dance sets, and then you play 2 production shows, and maybe a midnight special for a comedian or something like that. And I was really into it. I was really learning I wanted to learn how to play lead. And then I would go afterwards and try to practice after that at 3 in the morning, after probably having a couple of adult beverages or whatever like that. And then also sitting in with the lounge band down at the other end. These guys were from Berkeley and from New England Concertos. They're a really good jazz group. So I was running down in between shows and sitting in and playing jazz tunes, and basically fried my chops. And I had that, and I would go back into the dressing room at it'd be 3 in the morning, and I was going to practice my music, and I'd just be like on a G, and I remember thinking, oh no, this is not good. And I had no strategy for dealing with it. I didn't really know. No one had taught me to play lead. No one had given me any kind of concepts about rest or about building any kind of efficiency or any of the kinds of things that we would talk about in a group like this, or that we would deal with our students or share on gigs. So I was alone in the wilderness trying to figure this stuff out. So in any case, it took me about 2 months before I could really felt like I was some kind of a player that resembled my original self. Anyway, so we've got this sort of I said 3 kinds of playing, and then I'm going to go through them, and I'm going to take you through the one that I like to go through first. And so I said we've got repair. The second is training. Training is where you're playing music at such an intensity, or at a speed, or you're pushing some level of your ability beyond its current state. So if your chops are here and you can play a passage at 130, then attempting to play it at 134 or or 36 is here. It's something that you are trying to increase your ability, your technical ability. The things that are, you think about what's difficult in what we do. One of the things that's really underrated as trumpet players, because we're not saxophone players, but one of the things that's difficult to do on the trumpet is process quickly sometimes. So if you are suddenly given a passage that has a bunch of 16th notes and it's the fastest thing you've played all day, it's going to be difficult. So, so training might be in terms of intensity of the way you play. It might be in terms of register where you're playing. Training can fall into an approach that what you're going to do is push your basic technique a little bit or a lot past where it is right now. The third area is what I would just call low intensity or chop neutral playing. It's sort of based on Clark. Low intensity, relatively soft playing, lots of rest. The type of playing that if you're doing it correctly and you're taking the right type of rest, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, that you can do it all day. Or that you can play an hour of this low intensity. You can play repetitions that increase your technique. You can still be training at this low intensity way, but it's a way that you're being conscious of the amount of sort of chops that you have at any one time in the tank. And so if you have like a fuel gauge for your chops, a lot of times, especially when we're younger, we don't really know how to practice. We'll drain our chops until we get on empty and then fall off. And then you're done with your practice session and you can't play anymore. You might not be able to play anymore for the rest of the day, depending on how intensely and how, and sometimes that's not a bad thing to do. I know if I've got I do less of it, but when I've been working, I've got a heavy lead gig coming up. I might do that on purpose. I might go through a show and play it at full intensity and take out the rests and play an entire show or 2 sets worth of music for an orchestra, play it without the rest or play with very little rest and just hammer it. And that is another way of playing high intensity, but that would be training. And then I'm done. I'm not going to try to practice after that. I'm going to put the horn away. So understanding what real professionals have in the way that they interact and the way that they're able to be students of their own playing is understanding when you're actually tired, when you need rest, is being aware, building an awareness of your playing mechanism and pushing it, but also in such a way that you're learning about what your abilities are and where your levels are, and then always trying to improve them. So the third area, like I said, is what we might call flow. A flow state. This is a book called Flow, and it's by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. It's a Russian name, but check it out, Flow. And it's not as difficult to pronounce as Shishelsky, but it's something pretty bizarre like Shishelsky. But this is an interesting book. It's sort of in a pop psychology area, but it relates to what we do as artists and as people who are doing we're doing intellectual work and creative work that requires us to spend a lot of time doing either repetitions or things what we're doing, we're reinforcing. And so a flow state, when we talk about flow study, part of what we're doing is we're going into a flow state. We're playing something that we can already play. So if you're playing a Chickowitz study, which we all do, and you're playing it in a flow state, you're playing something that you've mastered. So the difference or the important designation is, and we can think about this, is that this is the requirement, the technical requirement for the music. This is your technical ability. If what you're asking yourself to do is down here, it's easy to be in a flow state. It's much easier. If what you're asking is reversed, if you don't have the technical ability to execute what you're trying to practice, if it's too far away, it's very difficult to get into a flow state. That's okay. You don't necessarily need to be in a flow state for that. What you're doing is a different aspect, and I get the term from this. It's deep work. This is Cal Newport's book. Deep work is difficult work. Deep work is it may be solving theorems or proofs, mathematical proofs. It may be doing advanced coding. It might be doing something that it might be writing or composition. And the book about the idea of deep work is something that's by nature very, very intense as a draw on your intellectual and your mental capacity. Your ability to do deep work requires, this is the type of unstructured time to really, really get to where in other words, if you're going to practice something, actually learn it, not just learn it well enough to get through the next, gig, but learn it for your lifetime, then you can't be under a time constraint for it. You have to learn it. You have to do what it takes to learn it. And that's different for everybody. Now, working in doing deep work, as a professional, you can create a flow to the process. In other words, I go through it this way. I lead myself mentally down this path in this way. But the work itself is very intense. Now, one of the things about deep work, and like I said, we're not going to be doing a bunch of deep work now, but is that from a mental standpoint and an attention standpoint and a cognitive psychology standpoint, it requires you to kind of take the inverted pyramid effect to where you're working in great detail. All right. And what you're going to find is what's generally missing from most players, in my opinion, in the way that they work on music, and the way it doesn't matter the style, is that the really, really, really top players are working in great detail. It may be phrasing, it may be articulation, it may be, but the ability to play or execute the passage is a foregone conclusion. Most of us only play something until we can play it. If you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, that detail, the extreme attention to detail, is what separates artists, high-level artists, from, in my opinion, at least the way that they process things. Some people do it intuitively, and they do it without, it's not necessarily conscious, but they are able to deal with very, very great levels of detail. Next time you see somebody that's doing an interview online, and they're somebody from the Concertgebouw or from the Vienna Philharmonic or whatever, you can guarantee that those artists are working in a level of detail that we never get close to, and it's musical detail. It's not, and some of it's technical, of course. So that type of attention and focus is draining, and it also takes a lot of time, and that's okay. It should take a lot of time. So one of my principles for practicing, I think it's important to get back to what we're trying to do, because the title of what I'm talking about today is with chops like these, who needs enemies? So how can I come at my practice in a way that I'm going to essentially embrace the process and make it as mentally and emotionally palatable as possible. The first thing that has to happen, certain conditions have to happen. One is I can't be in a hurry. If I'm in a hurry, I'm never going to be in that flow state. I'm never really going to be doing deep work. I'm just going to be mentally unsettled, and I'm not going to be getting much done. So if you're scattered and you think, oh, I've only got 5 minutes to do this, or it's very difficult to get that. It doesn't mean you can't get meaningful work, or you can't get face time, or you can't do things that you need to do. But I'm talking about the ideal way of mental and physical practice. Whereas if this is my, we have the jungle of our careers and lives and everything like that, but my practice room is a settled space, a clearing. It's where I can expect, or at least hope for, the most ideal conditions for practicing, and the highest possible expectations for what I'm doing. Okay, I know I'm talking a lot here, but I'm gonna get to a little bit of how I get to that place, or how I try to get to that place every day. Does anybody have any questions about anything? No? Are we good? I don't see anybody. I don't. All right. Well,
Did I,
cool.
did I
Yeah.
see Kevin raise his hand there? Kevin, did you raise your hand? No?
No. Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Um, so in any case, I think about my practice. I think about music. I think about the creative process a lot. I think about it a lot when I don't have the horn in my hand. All right. And I think that's part of that, where you're creating a sphere of mental activity and creative activity that you've got going. That's sort of like running in the background all the time. And when I'm driving in, or when I used to drive into work or school or to gigs, I'm thinking about teaching. I'm thinking about concepts like these. I'm trying to understand how I can do this better, but how I can get to the essential aspects of making this easier, and why, why is it so difficult sometimes. Now, that being said, I'm going to take you through a few things that I do, but I'll sit down and do the most simple things on a day and feel like I can't do anything. Some days, and I've been playing I'm 54. I've been playing for 42 years. And there are some days when I'm playing a scale and I'm going, I can't even play a scale. That's what it feels like sometimes. That never goes away. I don't think it does. So, but I know enough that I know that I actually can play a scale, so I can trust that I can do that, even though maybe it's going to take me a little longer than I would like for me to feel like it sounds great. So, so anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the first part of my routine, and then sort of how I process things, and then I'm going to take you through some new materials that I try to create for myself, and I'll share them with you guys for being creative, but still challenging my own way of playing on a daily basis. All right, so let's do this. The first thing that I like to do is most everybody has a set thing. I want for me to make it easy, and again, what we're trying to do is make it easy to make music, make the interface between the trumpet and everything as easy as possible. So what I do, the first thing that I do when I play, before I get ready to play, I interface a lot with the computer and with some apps. So while I'm getting everything ready, I might do just a couple of seconds of flapping, just to get everything going. Just enough of that so that I have a shot at being able to go and getting the first note out. Okay, so as it happens, I'll do a little bit of that, and then what I'm going to do, and I've got it I've made an MP3 for everybody. See if I can find it here, but I'll show you how it actually takes place in my. Where is it? I'm not sure if you're going to be able to hear it. Let me. Let's see. I'm going to turn on my metronome, and I want to see if you guys can hear this. Okay. All right. Hang on. Can you hear that? Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over, and the thing that I do is, let's see, am I sharing my sound with you? Let me see. I'm going to share sound with you. Can you still hear it? I just pressed the share sound. Can you still hear the? Okay. All right. So is there now any reverb or anything now that you didn't hear before? It's still the same basic sound. Okay, cool. That's what I want. So from this standpoint, though, what I'll do here is I want to play essentially with some drones. I'm going to play, and I do this. I'll show you how this works. I'm not actually going to play with a metronome yet, but I'm going to go in, and I have an interval timer, and I'm going to play 1 minute. I'm going to play along with an interval with a drone for 1 minute. All right. I'm going to rest as much as I want to. I'm going to improvise lightly with that. I may pick a mode. I may not. I may just play a little bit of we'll see what happens. I'm not really worried about what happens. And then what happens, I'm going to show you this now. Hang on. And I'm going to switch cameras so you can see my music stand. And let's see if that works. Can you see? Can you see the iPad over here? Sorry, let me. Okay, so you can see that. So I've got this interval timer, and it's basically going to give me 1 minute. All right. Now I'll play the drone on iTunes or whatever like that. For the case of this, though, what I'll do, I'm going to get this in the background, and I'm going to pull up my my tonal energy app, and I'll just start on low B flat. Can you hear that all right? Okay. Now, what's going to happen, I'll go back to that in just a second, but what's going to happen is I'm going to play for 1 minute, and then I'm going to, hang on a second here. I'm going to play for 1 minute, and I've got a timed break. All right. And my break, I've thought about this. I think about the break because I have very important things that I have to do. If I might have to switch over to the next, I got to take a second to switch over to the next drone. If I have a track that does, I don't have to do that anymore. But generally on a hotel room or whatever like that, I have to do this. I have to be able to drink at least one sip of coffee. All right? And I have to empty 2 spit valves. Okay? So between B flat and A, I have to have enough time to empty the spit valve, drink the coffee, change the drone, get ready, and play again. That's 20 seconds. Okay? All right, so the 20 seconds is my rest. And then I go on to the next thing. By the time I'm done with this thing, this is the first thing I do. It's super, I feel really, really relaxed. I'm going down from low B flat. And I'll give you just a demo of it. And if you've got your horns, can you hear that well enough to play along with that? Do you guys have your horns? Does anybody have their horn? And so if you've got your horn, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play low B flat or low C as soft as possible. And if I were walking you guys through this, what I would do is I would sort of guide you. I would say, now I'm doing this. I'm just going to, for now, just going to play the low C. But I'm trying to see if I can let any kind of excess tension. I'm going to do the opposite of get ready to play. I'm going to actually get loose. I'm going to try to, and this is what I do. It may not be the right thing for you, but what I want is, can I play nice and softly? And I'll generally do some fifths. Then what I might do is I might play the Westworld cadence. I like that one. I learned it in the circus in about 30 years ago. Anyway. And I'm just going to do that for a minute. So let's do that together. Just for a minute. Now, rest as much as you want. And I'll stop playing and talk to you guys while you're playing. And just remind you of some of the things that I'm trying to do. Okay? So, again, I'm going to switch videos so you can see what's going on here. All right, I'm going to start this. Here we go. All right, and it's going to count down. I'm going to move over to my tonal app here. Here we go, play. As you're playing, you want to let your lips just relax. If they're going to be, I like to think about them coming away from my teeth, so I'm not pinning my chops. And here we go. All right, that's our break. I'm going to do this. Sorry. Got time for a drink? Put the drink down. Get ready. Here we go. Cheers. Empty. Here we go. As you're playing, see if your tongue feels like it's kind of low in your mouth. Your chops feel kind of nice. You're playing softly. Can you play a little softer? Is it possible to play a little softer right now? What happens? Tongue it lightly. Legato. Keep the air going. Cool. Anyway, so I'm not going to go through all that, but you see I've got the 14 I've got a 14-second rest. That's 10 seconds now, and I'm turning that off. I'll go through three of those. I'm looking at a minute and 20 per note times 7. All right, and then I do this. I'm going to show you my. I'm going to switch cameras again. The next thing I do that I'm very, like I said, I want to keep on task, but I want to feel like I'm relatively um, um, uh, relaxed in how I do this, is I go and I have a timer app. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that all right. You probably can't. Let's see if I can. It's too bright, I think. Now it's too dark. Can you see that at all? And it's a series of timers. And then I'm going to take a minute and 30 seconds. I just time that, and it's going to talk to me in about a minute and 30 seconds. And like I said, it keeps me on task. I don't time the practice. That doesn't help me. I know what I need to do generally, and the problem is that anytime I know I'm going to practice something, it doesn't take the amount of time I think it's going to. It takes more, or I need to move on. So this is what I'm doing to keep on task. Now, the next thing I want to do, I might play some flow studies. You guys all probably do a Chickowitz study. And when I'm playing my flow study, I still do this. I put it on 60, and I play. And one measure in between. If you guys know that, let's play it together. I haven't played these today yet. So we'll start on G, and we'll just go down to the low C sharp to the F sharp. And then we'll take it. Hang on a second. Actually, my timer's going to start yelling at me here in a second. I want to make sure it's done. Okay. Good. All right. So here we go. And 1, 2, 3. All right. Rest. Ready? right? So that's what everybody does. So that's not a thing. I mean, everybody does some version of that. And not everybody, but everybody I know that does some type of flow study that's going to work like that. I want that at a moderate volume. Sometimes you'll hear something like this. Well, you should play this at a good, comfortable mezzo forte or something along those lines. And my point or my question with that, when I hear things like that, is, well, which is it? Is it mezzo forte or is it comfortable? Because they're not necessarily the same thing. And for me, actually, they're generally not the same thing. For me, comfortable is mezzo piano. And so I'm looking at, and I'm framing my entire practice day or week, even depending on the types of things that I'm trying to get ready for musically. Musically. So that's the governing. So we've got these principles of the type of playing that we're doing. And then there's also the overarching kind of principle that we have that is everything that we're doing, is it checking off just sort of a variety of skill sets, or is it serving your ability to play more challenging, more beautiful music than you can currently play more easily? So most of us, I think, go through things and without a lot of thought as to whether it actually helps you play the kind of music you'd like to play. And when I say kind of music you like to play, at least in my world, it's um, it's like music with people that you would play in front of people when you used to do stuff like that. All right. So sometimes maybe it's an etude, or sometimes it's something you want to record. But for me, I'm thinking, okay, well, and I think that's one of the main differences of somebody. And I talked to, I think Vini, might have mentioned this when we were hanging out, is that we look at someone like Alan Vizzuti or Sergei Nikiryakov and say, well, they don't count. I could never do that. They're so super geniuses, and that what they're doing, you couldn't draw a straight line from me to Alan Vizzuti. All right. So there's now we see someone like Doc. Doc, because of the way that he practices and the way that he plays, a lot of us can kind of say, I know, maybe if I had started 20 years ago and I practiced like Doc did, and I was really super disciplined, and I was I was everything lined up, I could maybe kind of play like that now, and at the age of 92, right? Now the where Doc is, and the amount of years I have left to likely I'm not going to get there. Most of us aren't, but you can kind of there's certain ways of playing that seem to be we can relate to. We can imagine ourselves doing something like that, or maybe we've even felt ourselves doing something that's like on a really great practice day where everything's lined up and you're like, yeah, man, I can triple tongue it at 160, and I can, or whatever it is. You have these kind of little moments or days or whatever where you go, like, I could do anything. I'm amazing. Can only do it for about 3 minutes, and then I can't do it again tomorrow. I can't remember how I did it, right? Whereas you're looking at someone like Sergey, and you're thinking, well, there's no way to do that. There's no way that I could do that. And you're right. There's no way for you to do that because you're not trying to do it. You're literally not trying to do what Sergey is trying to do. You're literally not trying to do the same thing that Alan Vizzuti is doing. We're sitting here playing, flow studies and scale studies and everything. I'm not saying Sergey and Alan Vizzuti don't do those things. They do. They do a lot of that kind of stuff. But they're also trying to play violin concertos. And most of us don't sit down and try to figure out, how do I play a violin concerto? We never get to it. There's not enough time in the day in the way we live our lives. So the reason that you can't play like someone like that is that you've never tried. None of us have really ever tried to play in earnest with the kind of time and dedication and thought and study that would go into playing like that. It's not that you couldn't do it. But we all know somebody that's a great player that picked up a trumpet when they were in 7th or 8th grade and started playing along with Maynard Ferguson records. And they didn't, guess what? They could play Maynard Ferguson solos because they were trying to play Maynard Ferguson solos, right? They weren't trying to play like warm up like Vincent Chickowitz and then play like Maynard Ferguson. They just picked up the horn and started playing like Maynard Ferguson. So a lot of those kinds of players don't come from, especially. Oh, hang on, my mom's calling. All right. A lot of those players that we might run into that start off like that have picked up a horn in 8th grade, or and they run into some playing issues later in life because they don't have the foundation, or they might not have the foundation. And you can get away with that for a while. But most everybody that I've known that's gone through that has had to come back to some point in their life that they're doing fundamental routine types of playing that come on. All right, I'm going to put airplane mode on and see if that makes me more professional to the 6,700 members of the Positive Trumpet. No, it doesn't. Okay, all right. Anyway, I get like 2 calls a week, and they both happened while I'm on this multinational, super important business call. Actually, that's my tax person, and that she doesn't have good news. It was a good year for lip slurs, but not for taxes. Anyway, so what was I saying? So in any case, we've got sort of this this way of playing that I'm saying is low intensity. The problem with low intensity is that if you do too much of it, you get noodly, and you don't really have the kind of underlying strength that you might need later on when you practice or when you play. So too much Herbert L. Clarke or too much playing softly after a certain point doesn't maybe lend itself to playing a salsa gig or lead for a show or something along those lines. And that's at least been my experience. So I want to make sure that even though I'm going to do most of my practicing, it's going to be pretty soft. I'm going to go in and do some Maggio, and I'm going to do that relatively loudly. So I'm going to do a little bit of training now. And so what I'll do, I'm going to share my screen with you. Let's see if I can find that Maggio here. And I've got a bunch of these up in, where would be Maggio? Oh, there's Maggio. Okay, so let me share the screen, and I'll show you how I do this and why I try to think of it a little differently. I'm not just playing through the next thing in my practice routine. What I'm doing is I'm going to make sure that when I do this, I am playing in a different way, in a way that's going to require me to play a little louder, and it's going to require me to push just a little bit of the volume past where I'm comfortable. Not a lot. So these are going to feel relatively loud compared to most of the stuff I've done up to this point. So let me share the screen with you, and I'll show you what I am talking about. Here's Maggio. I don't know how this ends up working for you guys. You see the Maggio warm up, right? Can you see that now? All right, and this kind of stuff is the reason why I wrote my books, because it's all diatonic. And it's all, basic root position chords. Same thing with with a lot of those Chickowitz basic flow studies. So as I do something like this, now I'm going to do this with let me do this. I'm going to do this with metronome and drone and tuner. Okay? So what ends up happening here, I go to Maggio. I've got a playlist. That's Maggio. I went to 72. All right? I'm going to go ahead and start that. I'm going to go to actually what I can do here is I can go, have you seen this where you can pull out the new operating system, and you can kind of move this over here. All right? So again, I'm going to be sustaining the pitches. Now, here's the thing about this. I do this with headphones on or earbuds because the drone affects the tuner. Okay? So I don't want the drone to be playing out loud. So I put on my headphones and make sure that I'm doing this in such a way that I can work on my intonation. So what I want to do here now is I'm going to start it back up again. Get this out of the way. Do that here. Sustain it. And I'm going to take 2 measures in between each one instead of 1. You'll see it, okay? So each one has 2 measures. Now I want to play slightly louder, and I want to open up and relax. For me, that's how I think of it. Relax on the bottom note. So let's play this together. Here we go. All right? Okay, and 1, 2, 3. Play the last note for 2 measures. 2, 3. last note for 2 measures. 1, 2, 3. 2 measures rest, same deal. Didn't get enough breath. 1, 2. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Hang on. Gotta switch octaves here. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Oh, all right, cool. Okay, so let's see here. How do I do this? And go back. All right. So the next thing that I would do is I like to play pedal tones, and I spent many years playing pedal tones. But I never, I took a lesson with Arturo Sandoval right when I got off a ship in 1990, I think in 1991, and he did his famous um, tone routine for me. And so I was like, okay, I think I did many years of doing pedal tones, and I ended up doing what a lot of people end up doing when they find something they feel like that works, and that is they play too much of it. All right, so I wound up doing this kind of longer and longer version of with Rudd. Do you guys see that? The lead pipe pedal routine that visible to I can't tell if you guys can you see it? Tiziano. Okay, yeah, I can see Tiziano. Okay, all right, there you are. Okay, so basically, same deal. I'm going to do this with a drone, and but I'm going to take out the tuning slide. And what this is going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to play pedal tones without having to manipulate my chops. I can just play the pedal tones like a natural extension. For me, that's important because I'm not having to do a bunch of movement with my jaw. I can still get what I feel like are the benefits of doing pedal tones. And I still keep the metronome going on. And then let's play this together. So this is just going to be, what you'll see here is you're going to play that in the correct octave, and then you'll do it again down the octave. I'm going to hold that last note for 16 beats. Okay? I'm going to breathe as much as I want. I'm not going to be worried about it. I'm going to breathe every time I feel like it, and I'm doing this for my lips. I'm not trying to make it some macho competition to see how long I can hold everything. Okay, so here we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now I'll take 4 bars in between. I'll take 4 or however long it takes to drink the coffee and let the spit run onto my leg from my lead pipe. Unfortunately, apparently that's what's happening. All right, so here we go. 2, 3. Okay, so what you're going to feel if you're like me is you're going to feel that those are I'm getting the nice sort of blood flow to my chops. I'm letting my air feel like it's moving freely, and I'm not sitting here having to do a bunch of stuff to get those notes out with my chops. For me, the benefits are exactly what I want them to be. I can do them softer, I can do them louder. I'm not trying to do some kind of extreme workout. But what it does is it gives, when I'm done with it, it feels like I've got a core thickness to my chops. It feels like I've got something underneath the mouthpiece now that's a little bit more substantial, that when I use a little bit of pressure, if I have to, I'm strong enough to be able to deal with any kind of more intense kind of playing. So this is a little bit of training, but it's like I said, I do it in a flow state. I do it in a way that I'm doing ear training. The last one, I go all the way down, and actually I have to drop the octave, and I go all the way down to low B. Now you're not going to be able to hear it very well, so I'll do both octaves. That means that the last one I do is going to be the bottom of the regular register. The regular register is low F sharp. So it would look like this. That's the octave, and then down the octave, you're going down this low. All right, pretty beefy. And again, it feels like what I'm doing there, it's letting me get the benefits of doing pedal tones without having to do a bunch of manipulation. I'm not worried about being able to use that register. I don't play in that register. So I have a very specific idea of what I want to get out of that exercise. And I do it in a way that feels like has the most musical application to the type of playing and player I want to be. I don't know if we're running out of time. I've got one more thing I want to hit, another concept, if we've got time. Are we, if anybody's got a split, I get that. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about, because a lot of people tend to ask, similar questions. Let me see if I can do this here. Where did you go? I lost it. There you are. I'm going to stop sharing there and get back to normal. Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about some upper register practice. All right, and this is something that everybody wants to talk about, and everybody wants to ask me about, or lead players. It's sort of something that's like a holy grail topic, and I think for me, I end up trying to dispel a lot of sort of misnomers and misapprehensions about what developing upper register is. It's a musical upper register. So if you're trying to develop your chops, you're trying to develop your musicianship, it means being able to play music that goes higher and stays up in a higher tessitura. It doesn't mean, and this is where I think a lot of people, it doesn't mean playing higher notes. And most people, when they're trying to develop their upper register, they're trying to play higher notes. And that's not really what the point is. The point is to be able to hang out in whatever register you're going to be without damaging yourself. And to be able to be up there long enough that you can find out where everything is, how to get there, how to get back and forth between notes, to practice in the upper register in a way that is not destructive, right? And again, we want to use our lower register or mid register as sort of a starting point, and we want to apply the same type of expectations to upper register practice that we do to everything else. Now that sounds great. Everybody says stuff like that or something along those lines, but it doesn't work because I think there's some really, really foundational issues that people are dealing with that are not correct. And so I want to go through, and I'll take you through. There are many different ways to do this, and I'm going to do something. I just kind of thought I need a fun thing to do. So yesterday I sat down and I said I'm going to write out something, and I'm going to show you how one way you might attempt to build your upper register or to build your musical upper register. Now the first thing is that the thing in my opinion, in my humble opinion, is that the upper register starts a lot lower than everybody thinks it does. Okay? If you say, where's your upper register start? I don't know. Most people are going to start thinking above the staff. And for me, when I start to notice where things start to change a little bit, where I start to feel not the same freedom that I have in the rest of the horn, is about a D above a C on the staff when you get into that next partial there. So I'm going to look at my my practice in ways is okay. Well, let's actually think. What if we think of from B flat to F as being our first area that we're going to shed or we're going to work out, and make that feel our sort of our starting point. All right. So here's something that I did. I will. Okay. Let's see. And a little something that I did yesterday. And what this is, and let me go back to the screen sharing. This is just based on the second part or the upper part of Clark 4. So Clark 4, if you know Clark 4, I think it's right. That's Clark 4. Yeah, that's Clark 4. I see nothing. I only see 4 of you, and none of you guys are moving at all. That's Clark. We know it's Clark. I think it's Clark 4. All right. So in any case, the minute you do that one, you're covering a full octave. All right. Plus, you're jumping down a fourth, or from the F to the C. You have to get that. There's a lot of coordination things that are going on with that, and also so what I want to do is I say, well, what if I just took the top part of that? And then what I'm going to do, and I'll show you this. This is just I'm calling this sort of establishing your base camp. So I think about the upper register. Steve Thiel has a mountain behind him. Is that Mount Fuji? It's not Mount Fuji, is it? No. In any case, it's a nice mountain, and I like to use the mountain climber analogy for how I think Mount Hood. Okay, all right. It's beautiful. In any case, for high altitude climbers, when you look at, I like to watch the documentaries when they go into and hike the Himalayan mountains, or something like hike. I guess they scale Mount Everest. The first thing that they do is they go and they establish a base camp, so they can become acclimated to the thin atmosphere. So I'm looking at the beginning of my upper register practice as a way to become acclimated to hanging out in a slightly higher tessitura. Going to hang out in my base camp is going to be from B flat or C to the top of the staff. So okay, so the idea here is, and I'm going to show you the actual. I'm going to share it with you now, and I'll here it is. Let's see if I can find this. This will be where is it? Base camp. All right, there you go. Here's a base camp study. There is nothing about this that's interesting or hang on a second. Let me see if I can't see you guys. All right, yeah, so there's nothing about it that's interesting or even novel. What is hopefully helpful about it is that it's just a starting point, and here's what we're going to do. I can just put on my metronome or not. I don't have to go fast. Generally, for something like this, I might put it on, say, 120. To me, that seems to be a, um, 112, 120, something along those lines. And but what I want to do is I want to do enough repetitions of this stuff so I can start to feel where everything is. So I can really tell if the notes are slotting in, if they're in place. And then you'll see what I have here, I think, on the, you repeat this part here until you smooth out the wrinkles. All right? So again, it's just a scale. This is nothing. You can do this with any kind of music that you want to work on in any key or whatever. This is just an idea. Now, here are the two things that I want to do with this. If I take that and we play that together at, say, 120, um, okay, there's 120. So what we're going to do, and what I'm going to do is I'll put this on. We'll play it together. And as I'm doing this, I don't have to think about it. It's just a scale. I'm going to play this 4 times. I'm going to play the repeated section here. Can you see this that I say here? This I'm going to play 4 times. Okay, for now. All right, let's play it 4 times. I'm going to play this, and then I'm going to get to this area right here. I don't know how well you can see this. And I'm going to rest for 10 or 15 seconds. During that 10 or 15 seconds, I want to feel that my chops go from kind of back up to being fresh. They feel fresh again. All right, and then when I'm going to repeat the whole thing, with the repeats at this tempo, it's going to take about 20 seconds to play through, just 20 seconds, okay? So let's put this on. We'll play through it. We're going to repeat, again, the 3rd line 4 times. Let's just see what happens. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now we're going to rest. I'm going to feel the blood come back to my chops. As I'm doing this, I want to feel my chops that I'm not using a bunch of excess pressure. I'm going to wait just another second or two. Feels pretty good. Let's do it again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now if I do that, if I take 20 seconds rest or 15-second rest, it takes me 20 seconds to do one of these things. Each one of these takes about a minute. I can do these up to high C and then be done with my upper register practice in about 10 minutes or 9 minutes. I don't need to be spending, an hour hammering away in upper register work. I want to get acclimated. I want it to feel like I know what I'm doing and that I'm relatively comfortable up there. The thing that's missing here, and that you can't do it when we're all playing together, on the first repeat for me on the scale, I start to get a little stuff in my sound. I don't know if you can hear it. I don't know how well you can hear it. But as I'm doing that, hopefully that sounds pretty pure. Could it sound pretty? I don't know what it sounds like. I can't hear it. But you shouldn't. I mean, you're hearing the bell sound, but it should sound. There's not a bunch of excess noise. The more of these that you do get a little higher, I start to really, really notice it around A flat and A. Okay, so when I get up to A, well, let's say D flat. Okay, I'm doing a little bit of workout. It's like a lightweight workout, but I can definitely feel that I'm having to keep things in place there. And then when I do the repeat, same kind of deal. I want to make sure that I've got, as I'm using, I can work on using a little less pressure. I can, but I'm going to do those repeats if I, especially if I hear some stuff in there. I want to get them. I want to get them evened out so that my repetitions aren't just play it, but I'm trying to make it on the fly. I'm trying to clean up the sound and the execution of what's going on. I'm not doing it resetting, getting everything right. I want to see what I need to do, and generally it means I need to kind of, I may have to lean into the sound. I might play a little bit louder to balance out the pressure that I'm using, or whatever it is. I have to make some adjustments, and that's letting me hang out up in that upper register, which is lower than most people think. And I take these up to, say, I don't know, I take these up to what, C, and I just wrote this yesterday, so I've never actually done it all the way through. I just did it as a possible type of way to approach developing or hanging out in the upper register. Small periods of time, relatively low intensity. This, again, is also low intensity. I'm not doing it loudly. Okay? At this point, I'm playing it with a more of a jazz mouthpiece. I might really spend, I've been spending a lot more time playing my lead mouthpiece, my Patrick mouthpiece, Vini, right? But okay, so I don't know what that sounds like because I'm relatively new setup here, but the idea here is a little bit of this goes a long way. You don't have to do a whole ton of it. You don't have to spend, you know, an hour a day doing weightlifting with your face. I think the more of this that you do, and so what I'm, and again, the upper register as I'm approaching it, I'm not thinking about higher notes. I'm thinking about staying up in a particular register. I'm trying about cleaning things up. I'm trying to build an awareness of what it feels like on my face. If I'm kind of jamming in a little bit, guess what? I can try not to. Vince DiMartino had a great quote, and it was like someone asked him, you know, didn't you ever used to at one point in your career like really mash and use a lot of pressure and you know, beat up your chops, and Vince said, yeah, I used to do that, but I stopped doing that. And it seems like a little bit of a, you know, yeah, all right, but there's only one way to do that. If you have to be aware that when you're doing it, you have to have a coping mechanism, a strategy for not using a bunch of pressure. Generally, what ends up happening is that, especially when we're trying to play loudly, I think that's when that a lot of pressure comes in. So I'm not trying to play loudly. I'm not interested in a big sound. Some people want to have a big sound. That's what they're going for aesthetically. I want to have a big sound. I've played very successful concerts, and people have come up to me, and it never really has been a priority to hear the audience say, "Your sound was so huge." You know, it's like, hey, your music was beautiful. You were doing something that was meaningful in a musical way, and it doesn't mean I don't like playing high notes or that I don't like like working on that kind of thing. But the first thing that goes in most of this practicing is volume, and I can do this what I just did for a long period of time. And and there are other ways to access that, but it's more about the principle of what I'm trying to do: lower intensity, raising the tessitura of what you're practicing, lots of rest, fixing things while you're up there, not having to reset, and see if you can build an awareness of what it takes to get these things out. And if I slow down a little bit or I have to shift a couple of intervals, that's not a problem. And so what I'm doing is I'm actually making upper register practice, hopefully as low intensity as it can be, but still be up in that register. And now I'm playing music in the upper register, and I'm not hammering it. I'm just playing it, right? And I'm not trying to play as loud as 8 trumpet players in Mahler or an entire brass section. I'm just trying to play notes. And if you can get the notes out, that's like 95%. Just play the notes and the rhythms. That's 95% of what we do. I don't have to crush it, kill it, and play it amazing. You know, if it's good music, it's going to sound good if I play it. So I'm trying to take off the emotional and musical pressure by just making it as easy as possible to practice and to play. When I get when I go into the practice room, these are the places I want to go mentally. These are the places that I want to go from an emotional, sort of spiritual place. I want to make friends with my face. I want to feel like I'm not going to just go in and, I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, it's hard work. And, all right, I'm going in, I'm going to practice. I'm going to work hard and I'm going to, it's like, no, it doesn't have to be that way. Now, sometimes on a gig or sometimes in a practice, it's going to be high intensity. And depending on the musical demand of the gig, yeah, you're going to have to hammer. You're going to have to, go in and play a Sinatra show or something like that with an orchestra up in Columbus, in February. I guess it's the last one of those I did. And you're playing B flats and stuff like that on Luck Be a Lady, and you're really, really, there's a lot of high intensity playing. But I don't have to practice like that for probably 90% of what I do, of my practice. And I can train leading up to those gigs with more intensity. Again, it's going to vary from gig to gig, but I want it to feel like this when I'm playing music. And if I can't make it feel like that in the practice room, I'm sure not going to feel like that on the gig. And everything that you're told, I think you can turn around. Any good piece of advice, almost all the time, you can almost look at it backwards, and it might work. Not all of them, but so a lot of times they'll say that you want to practice like you're performing. I've heard that one a lot growing up, and you know what that ended up doing is it put a lot of pressure on me in the practice room. I always felt like I had to play perfectly in the practice room. I always felt like I couldn't make mistakes. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I didn't feel like I was, it was very frustrating to practice. When I got my first college teaching job, my second college teaching job, about 15 years ago, I was a super early riser, and I would get into the building at 7, and I would start practicing at 7 in the morning before everybody was there. And I was in my studio, and I was afraid to miss notes for the first 2 weeks while I was warming up and practicing and I was a trumpet professor. And I was weirded out by it. I was like, oh gosh, what's going to happen? That was not that long ago. That's when I was in my late 30s, my early 40s. So I'm 54 now. So there's a lot of things that you can address. And if you don't feel the way that you want to feel when you're doing this process, what do I need to do? And that's what boils down. This is, I think I talked to you about this, Vinny. Your number one question, or your two questions that overarch all of your principles, all of your practicing. We know the first one. What would this sound like if it were beautiful? Okay, what would this sound like if it were beautiful? Not perfect. Clean and beautiful is what I'd like. Clean and beautiful. And it's easy enough that I can phrase it the way I want to phrase it. I don't have to worry about being able to even just play it. So what would it sound like if it were beautiful? What would it feel like if it were easy? What would it feel like to play your instrument if it were easy? That's what I'm going for. What would it feel like if it were easy? And everything has to be in that light. That's the light. It doesn't matter if I'm playing Schlossberg or Flexus or Clark or upper register things. What's the easiest version of this physically and mentally? It's two things. So that my mind's not going, oh, if it's too fast, it's not easy. Your mind is struggling. One more thing that I'll show you that I do that I think goes to that. And I'll show you my and all routine practice should be growing your skill set, meaning you're getting better. It's not that you're just playing the same thing you played yesterday. All right, you can start learning pretty quickly in your practice. I think a lot of people wait too long. All right, so something as simple as taking a chromatic scale and speeding it up with your metronome. Everyone's got a metronome app. And the simple version of this is just to go a minor sixth and go, okay, you're going to hear this. It's going to speed up and it's going to go 21 times. Okay, all right. So I got the wrong one on. That one actually goes up to 172. 16th notes at 172. So I'm actually going faster than I can do it. I'm making myself go faster than I can actually play it. Every day, I'm still trying to play it faster than I can play it. And does not cost me any chops. I can do that because it's Clark, it's soft, and I can get better with my technique immediately. It's free, it doesn't cost anything. I just speed up my metronome. And I make sure that I'm playing it faster than I can play it and still trying to play it, not letting that stop me. So I had about another 5 clicks. It was going up 2 clicks at a time, and that is something that you do. Um, you could look at what you're doing. You just don't do the same stuff every day and don't do it the same way. Otherwise, you're practicing things that you can already play, and then that's a waste of time. So even if you're playing the same stuff, you're going to practice it in a new way or a way that challenges you. All right, cool. There's so much to do. There's so much to talk about. Does anybody have any questions? I know I'm way over. I guess I don't mean to be doing this. Who's got? Do we have to split, or anybody want to ask any questions? Or I put my
I think I think we're okay on time as long as people want to hang, man. As long as you have the time, we'd like
yeah.
to
It's
keep
nice to
you, of
hear
course,
somebody's voice. Just talk for a while, Vini.
for all the information. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to digest. And of course, Scott, tell us if somebody wanted to make this a little bit more one-on-one, how would we get in contact with you?
I have. I guess just email me, Scott Belck. You can get my website, Scott Belck, or scott.belck at uc.edu or scottbelck.com. Um, I've been getting a lot more. Uh, I guess people contacting me wanting to get together. I guess I could. I've not really done a lot. I've got the setup now to do some online work. So I know there are a lot of
Yeah,
great players, a lot of great
and
people out there that. Yeah, go ahead.
it's working good. I mean, the whole screen sharing and the different microphones and the different shots with the camera. That's a
Cool.
really great setup you got. So I'm sure you'll be tweaking that as we go. So basically, what I'm similar to what I do in that you're preparing yourself in the practice room for what's going to happen sort of in your real world. So whatever that looks like, you're getting yourself ready in a relaxed and real chill way for whatever's coming once you walk out the door. And if you're at a point where that's what I do with my routine every day. I know what's going to come out the end of my horn when I'm done with my routines, or when I walk into the studio, if it's going to be a good day or a great day. I just kind of know what's going to be happening, and that's what I'm really gleaning from you is that just make sure you have enough time, use your time efficiently, practice things that you know you need every day, possibly in a different way. I mean, it's just a ton of great information. Thank you very much.
No, I'm happy to
Anybody?
hang. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody on the Zoom call have a question? Raise your hand, unmute yourself, and fire away. Make it a good one and hard because
or a bad one. I
Dr.
don't care. You know.
Dr. Belk deserves that.
You know.
Anybody? Okay. We were unable to share this live to the Facebook group, but Scott, we'll get this posted up. Troy will get this posted up um, ASAP, and we'll get a bunch of feedback from that. But again, thank you for giving us so much of your time. Let me do a little bit of housekeeping
Sure,
because this will
absolutely.
turn into a video. Um, we have a guy, Joe Pino, is coming on tomorrow at 6:30 Eastern time, and he's doing a show called Boppin' by the Slice. So he's going to teach you how to make a pizza pie, and then he's going to talk about some bebop. He's a wonderful player. He posts often on Positive Trumpeters Worldwide. Um, Sign up for the mailing list on our homepage, positivetrumpetersworldwide.com. It takes a long time to type that out, but put it in some sort of a, and then you'll get one mailing a week, and it'll have all of the links to the Zoom and the live feeds and all that good stuff. And we respect your privacy. We won't sell your stuff and or give it away. We'll just let you know kind of what's going on. Also, the web store's open, and as you can see, Troy Troy's over here for me. It's like this is like
No,
the a
Troy's up there
really
for me.
big
That's for
Brady Bunch, right? He's got a Positive Trumpeters Worldwide T-shirt on. If you have any questions for Scott, once we get the feed up on PTW, fire away. I know he's on there fairly often. Everybody, stay healthy and stay safe. And again, Dr. Belck, you're awesome. Thank you so much.
I'm positive.
Yeah, I'm positive you're awesome.
I told my wife what we were going to do, and she's like, "Has there been some mistake? Do they know have they worked with you before?" Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
y'all.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much. I appreciate you. All right.
Great,
We'll see
great
you.
hanging with you guys. All right. Cheers. Take care.